Hello and welcome to Module 5 of RTVB 1302, Computer Apps for Media Production. So in this module, what we're going to be doing is working in Premiere Pro to insert a still image in our project, and also we're going to be working with effects and going over how those work. And so those are the two main things that we're doing in this. So I'm looking at your assignment, and so we need to use 2 to 3 effects, or use effects to enhance 2 to 3 shots. And then we're going to insert the logo to create and use a transitioning mask to reveal the logo. And then we'll be turning that in as usual. So what I've done is I've gone through and I've made a version of this, and then I'm going to walk you through how I did this. So here it is, what I created.
You ever wonder how you can help a neighbor in need? Making sure they have enough to eat is a good place to start. The Red Door Food Pantry. Take what you need. Give what you can.
Okay, so that's it. Let's get into it. All right. So from the beginning here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually refer back to my edit just so I can kind of keep track of what I'm doing. But I'm going to click over to this sequence right here. And so this is the sequence that I started with. So I made an official version of my edit. And just listening to that just now, I think the VO needs to be a little bit more bright. So I'm just going to take this and crank it by 2.8, and yeah, I'll be happy with that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to duplicate this sequence, and this is the process that I used to actually create the one that I just showed you. So to duplicate it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it and come up here and go duplicate. And look, it makes a copy for me right here, and I'm just going to name this one Effects and Graphics. Effects and Graphics Tutorial. Okay, so from there, what I'm going to do is open this up. I'm going to close my original, and I'm just going to switch these right here. So you'll notice that you may or may not be aware of this yet, but you can have multiple sequences open in the timeline. So this is the one that I just showed you, the one that I just created. I'm sorry, the one that I just edited. And actually, that is not true. Sorry. This is the one that I just was editing and I created, and this is the one that I'm going to be working with. Okay, so let's begin, shall we? So just to keep everyone sane, I'm going to mute the audio for right now. And let's look and see what we have. So I'm just letting this play through, and I'm just taking in what I've done. I've cut this to actually 30 seconds exactly. Now, this is not a picture lock at this point. It's pretty close, but I'll probably still tweak a few things as we get into retiming shots. Okay, so I know I want my logo to appear at the end. Okay, and I want it to appear as the car goes past, and I wanted to use the car as a way to reveal the logo. So we're going to work on that. And so we also need to throw some effects in here. And there's 2 obvious spots, and you may or may not have spotted them. So let's go ahead and look at this. And I'm just going to go through here frame by frame. Okay, this is looking okay. And I'm going to get right here. And uh-oh. We have a reflection of a cameraman right there. That is a distracting mistake that if we needed to use this part of the shot, well, basically we can. But I purposely left this part in here because I want to show you how to salvage that. So we're going to work on that. So let's begin, shall we? Okay, so we're going to work with layers, or tracks, I should say. We're going to work with several versions of this on a track to make this effect. To make an exact copy of this clip, it's very simple. On Windows, you hold down Alt, and I think it might be Option on a Mac. Just hold down Alt and then drag, and then you have an exact copy. As long as you drag it right above, then you're good to go. So the key to this is a couple of things. One is I think we need to make this darker, and two, we need to blur it. Not just with any blur though, because if you put a regular blur, it's going to be obvious. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you the solution, and that is we're going to use what's called a directional blur. And so I'm going to pull up my effects. And to get to my effects, and let me just go through here real quick, and I'm going to close some of these panels that we don't need, just to make life a little easier. Okay, so I'm just going to take my effects and I'm just going to drag it right here. Okay. Okay, so we're going to use something called a directional blur. Before I get into applying that though, I want to show you a process called masking. So what masking is, essentially, it's cutting out a portion of this image and leaving everything else around that in that layer transparent. To demonstrate this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn off or make invisible, turn off the visibility of the bottom or V1. So I'm going to come over here, and on V2, I'm going to come to my very last frame. Okay, right there is good. And what I'm going to do on the opacity in the effects controls panel, so this is different from the effects panel, it's the effects controls panel. Every single clip should have an effects controls panel. So when I click on this clip, I get the effects control panel for this clip. And when I click on this one, I get the effects control panel for that clip. So it's one place that you'll find the panel, but it's always specific to the clip that you're working on. So I'm going to come over here to effects controls. And again, I'm going to come over here to the very end frame. That's great. And I'm going to draw a mask. So how do you mask something? Whenever you see these three icons, so the ellipse, the polygon, and the pen tool within the effects the effects control panel, those are your masking tools. And we're going to free draw with the pen tool. And whenever I click that, you'll see that I get a mask that pops up. Now from here, what I want to do is actually want to make this a bit bigger, have a little bit more real estate that I can work with. I'm going to draw a shape around the window. I'm going to try to be fairly accurate when I do this. And I'm going to just click. Whenever I click, you'll see that I get a line. Now this is interesting. You'll see that I have a curved line right here. I could come in here and I could click a jillion times, but I don't want to do that. There's an easier way to do it, and it's called a Bezier curve, spelled B-E-Z-I-E-R. Bezier is a French dude named Bezier, I think, invented that. We're just going to go with that. So you notice that I clicked and I have a straight line. The straight line doesn't quite fit the, I guess, the curved line of the body of the car. Now I'm still holding down my left mouse button, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag, and as I drag, see what happens. See, I have the ability to curve this line now. The further I drag these handles out, the more, I guess, in the center, you could say, the inflection point is for that curve. So I'm going to put that about right there. That looks good. I'm going to put that there. Now, whenever you do a Bezier curve, the very next point that you put down will also be curved, and we're going to have to correct for that in one moment. That's no big deal. And then this is a fairly straight line, so I'm just going to come over here and do one more straight line. Okay, so again, we have to do one little fix there. I'm going to come grab the hand tool. And the hand tool will allow me to drag the image around. I just need to see the side of the frame here. And I'm going to go back to my selection tool and come up here. Now, to fix this, all I have to do, now I'm going to tell you, this is very sensitive. You're going to have to push in this handle, but as you do, you can't go up or down or you'll mess up your curve. So you have to very carefully push in that handle. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm just going to take this and move this back a little bit. Let me bring it up just a bit. Okay, now what I'm going to do is come back here and I'm just going to select fit. All right, there's my mask. And now I have a problem though, and that is it doesn't stay in one spot. We're going to need to animate this mask over time to be able to cut out what we need to cut out. Okay, so, and again, we have a mask here that we're going to work with. So, that being said, and actually, you know what I think I just did? I did do that. I'm going to actually switch these, and you're going to see that actually when I made my mask, I made it on my bottom layer. And so that's not a big deal. What I'm going to do is take this and I'm going to trade places with these two. So I need the cutout version on top to make this work. Sometimes Premiere's a little finicky in that you select something and you look over and you've accidentally selected something else in the meantime. So I need to make this mask follow the shape of, case in point, what just happened right there. Maybe that will help if I put on my track targeting and source patching on 2. Okay, so again, I take that. I look like I'm in good shape now. So what I need to do, I need to animate this over time. And to do that, I'm going to use keyframes. So we touched on keyframes a little bit in Module 4, and we're going to continue that today. So I'm going to click on, if the mask disappears, by the way, you just click on the name of it. You can have multiple masks on a single clip. So I'm going to click on the mask name. In this case, it's called Mask 1, right? And mask path, that's what we're going to be animating. So in order to animate anything in Premiere, you have to first enable the keyframes. And to do that, or in this case, it's called the toggle animation button. Looks like an old-timey stopwatch. I'm just going to click on that. And when I do, you'll see that a diamond icon appeared right here. That's a keyframe. And then I also got a set of buttons right here. So whenever my playhead is on a keyframe, I want you to, I got a little crazy there. Let me go back here. Whenever the playhead is on the keyframe, you'll notice that the button turns blue. And as if I take the playhead and I move off of the keyframe, it's now no longer blue. That will alert you that you are actually on a keyframe. That's really important to know sometimes. So again, I'm going to take in my mask path. And what I'm going to do now is come over and I'm going to go a few frames back at a time. So let's say 2 at a time, right? And then I'm just going to take this mask path, or this mask, and just move it back. I'm going to try to make it fit the shape as much as possible just by doing this. And I will probably have to keep clicking on the clip in the timeline to get it to where I'm taking the arrow key and I'm just pressing it 2 times each time I do this. Okay, now as the perspective of this changes, you can see that my shape is no longer fitting as good as it used to, and that's okay. So when that happens, what we can do is come over here, back and grab the selection tool, and I can take and I can move these points around a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit, just enough to make, uh-oh. Something like that happens, don't freak out, just hit Control Z. And it will fit for you, or it'll go back to where it was. Okay, so that's pretty good. Come back here again. And this is like watching paint dry, or watching, it's even worse than that. This is like having someone describe what it's like for paint to dry. Bear with me. We're almost done here. If this were a more complex maneuver or process, I would probably fast forward it right now for you, but we're almost done. In the world of animating a mask, and that's what this is animating a mask, this is pretty straightforward. Let's see if I can make this work without having to go back and edit the other portion of this. Now you notice every single time that I move this, you may or may not be paying attention, it puts down a new keyframe for me right here. So whenever your keyframes are active and you move something around, by default you always get a new keyframe. I think that'll probably be okay. Probably could have gone 3 frames on these and made it work. Press V to enable my selection tool. So obviously if you were to do 3 frames instead of 2, it'd go by, I don't know, you'd have 50% less keyframes in here, but hey. All right, and then as soon as you get to where the mask is off screen, guess what? It's a moot point at that time, and you don't have to worry about it. Now, let's test it out, right? What I want to do is just come over here and see how well it lines up. I think it's okay. All right, so now we get to the fun part, and that is we get to do something about this reflection. And as promised, we are going to use what's called a directional blur. So the fastest way to find an effect, you can go through and say, okay, it's blur and sharpen and directional blur. Okay, so when you're first starting out, it's probably good to do that just so you can kind of learn what all of the effects are that you have to work with. I've been doing this so long, I just type it up here. So and really you don't have to type all of the word, just as much as you need for it to identify it. So now, because we have this mask here, what's going to happen, it's going to only apply the effect to that part of the image, and it's going to leave everything else alone. Because again, if I turn that off, we've masked out or we've cut out everything but that window. Okay, and so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the blur length, and I'm just going to go crazy at first. Oh wow, look at that. Kind of nuts, man. Okay, so here's why we want to use a directional blur. The car is moving from right to left, and so we can make a directional blur work because we can turn it to the side and hopefully make it look somewhat like motion blur. Now we don't have to totally obscure it. All we have to do is just really make it to where we can't tell it's a human being standing there, right? So we're going to do one more trick after this to also make it a little bit easier to not notice it, right? Okay, so here's what we came up with, right? Now this is not perfect. I will tell you this, that if you're going to be doing some heavy duty masking, Premiere is not the program to do it in. That's an After Effects process, right? That you really want to do that in, right? But for something like this, that is, I'm just going to use the words quick and dirty, then yeah, why not? And plus you get to learn how to do it in a relatively fun environment. Okay, so this is the shape of our mask. You'll notice there's a little circle. It's almost a handle. This is the edge feather, right? So I can take this and feather this out a little bit. And so when you do that, it makes it a bit more forgiving for you, right? Okay, so let's look at a before and an after here real quick. So again, I'm just going to take and turn this off. Okay, so I think we're getting somewhere with this. That is not bad, but I will say that it's still, we could do one more thing to it, and that is I think we need to adjust the brightness level of this top layer just to bring it down. And for that, we're going to actually go to a different workspace. So we may or may not have used workspaces yet, and so Premiere has different functionalities that you can, or different, tasks that it's geared towards for different disciplines. And we're going to pop over to the color workspace. So right now, by default, you're on the editing. We're going to go to the color workspace. And when we do, you're going to see a brand new little window pop up here to the side, and it's called the Lumetri. It's a fancy word, Lumetri color panel. And yours may look a little different. You may have different drop downs turned on, and that's okay. So I'm just going to do one thing here, and that is I'm going to go into my curves, and I'm going to go to my RGB curves. And with this selected, all I'm going to do is right here in the middle of the curve, I'm just going to take and just bring this down. And as I do, you'll see that the window dramatically becomes darker. Okay, and let's just scroll through here. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's do this. I'm just going to turn this off. And so that's where we started, and that's where we wound up. Okay, I think I'm gonna probably leave it here. I might just do one more little thing, and that is maybe I want to tighten this feather up just a little bit to make it to where the edges are a little bit more darkened, because the more I do this, the lighter the edges get. Okay, so I need to find a happy medium between blurring out the edges and making the edges darker. Okay, we'll go with that. Why not? So hopefully, now you may or may not have used that part of the image, but there's other things that we can do to right? So another thing that you can do is that you can actually draw a mask right here, and you can brighten up the passengers in the car in relation to the outside. That's another thing that you can do. But in our case, I like to show that as an example, just to show that, hey, it's possible to hide things in the shot that you never really thought of before. Okay, so let's continue on, right? So one more effect that is pretty handy is right here, okay? So this particular project was shot on a camera called a Panasonic Lumix GH4. It's my personal camera. I've had this camera for well over 10 years now. And it's an okay camera. It was great for its time, but I can tell you that it's getting a little dated. And the what's called the dynamic range of the camera is a little lacking. It does not have the ability to capture really good highlights and, I guess, lowlights or shadow areas in the same image. And so this was a balance, right? So I was working very hard when I shot this to not overexpose, which it still is a little bit, but not drastically overexpose this part of the image, the outside. But yet I didn't have a way to get enough light on his face. So we're going to go through, and after the fact, we're going to put a little light on his face. And so we're going to use the same technique we did before. And we're going to hold down Alt or Option and then drag up and make a duplicate of this. Okay, and then once we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to make a ellipse mask this time. So I'm just going to click on this one time, and it's going to make me an ellipse mask. I'm going to take it and put it roughly over his face, and I can make it a little bit more face shaped here. Now we do have one small issue, and that is he turns his head, right? So we do need to animate the mask just ever so slightly. Okay, so we're going to maybe start it about right here, and then on my mask path again, I'm going to put it down a keyframe, and let's come back here, and then I'm going to move forward to where he turns his head. And then I'm just going to maybe move it just a little bit. Just about like that. And let me just see this. And that seems to stay up with him pretty well. All right. Now, we still have our Lumetri color panel up. And then to brighten this up, it's very simple. All I'm going to do is just take and brighten this up. Hey, that's great. Now, I'm purposely not going to feather this yet, right? So you can see what's happening. Okay, so that's pretty good. And whenever I add a feather to this, it's going to do a lot to hide it for me. So for that, again, I'm just going to click on my mask and come over here and just grab this little circle and feather it out. I'm going to be rather generous with this feather, because the more I feather this, the more it will hide. So I got about 280 pixels of feather there. All right, and yeah, is it perfect? No, but for right now, I think we're doing pretty good, right? Let's do it before and after. That's before and that's after. So that's a pretty good use of an effect to make that a bit better. Okay, that's great. We've already got two effects accomplished. What I'm going to do now is let's work with the still image for the logo. I'm going to come over here to Window, Workspaces, and go back to my editing workspace. And I guess the main one, the hero one at the end is when it appears, right? And so we use the car as a way to reveal the logo. So that's great. So what I'm going to do first is come over here and go to my graphics, and I'm going to grab the logo and just take it and plop it right here. Okay. Now, obviously it needs a little work. I'm just going to come over here and double click on the logo and come to the effects controls. And you'll see that I have some position, scale, rotation, parameters that I can adjust. I'm going to work with the scale for a moment. And let's scale that down. I'm going to adjust the position. I want to try to get it right in the middle. If you want, you can actually use your cursor to adjust the position. You have to click on the motion heading for the effect. Then you can take and just move this around. Okay, so that's not too bad, right? What I'm going to do is, again, make this a little larger so we can kind of see more of what's happening. Okay, that's pretty good. Now, we want to make this look like an actual sticker that's on there, or a painting, or some sort of print. As it is right now, I'm not really buying it. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to switch my blending mode. And I think screen might work pretty well, or I'm going to go with screen, right? Yeah, I'm not done yet. Okay, so that's not too bad. So you can kind of see some of the food behind it. It gives it some kind of real world look to it. But I think it needs one more element, and that is, I think it needs a drop shadow. So to do a drop shadow, we're going to have to do one more thing. And I'm going to make a copy of this. And again, just Alt Option and drag up. Okay. From there, we have an effect called drop shadow. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to type drop for drop shadow, take the effect. Now, two ways to apply the effect. I can take it and just drag it and put it onto the effect, or I can, with the clip highlighted, I can double click it. And when I do, you'll notice the effect shows up right here. Really, that's the fastest way to do it. Back in the day when I always learned just to drag it on there, but sure, you can double click it and it'll go right onto the clip or graphic, whatever the asset is, right? Now, here's the thing. With a blending mode engaged, other than normal, you're not going to see the drop shadow. So I need to go back to normal blending mode. But when I do that, it kind of defeats the purpose of my screen blending mode that I put on top. Well, there's a little button right here called Shadow Only. When I press that, guess what? Guess what you see? The shadow only. Okay. So it's the little things in life, folks, that really just make it worth living. You can play with things like the distance. Don't get too crazy with it. You need something subtle just to make it look like it's applied to the surface. Maybe softness. Crank that up just a little bit. I'm going to go full screen with this, and it's a little better. It's maybe a little heavy-handed, but it's a little smaller on the screen too. So I don't know, maybe we come down on the distance to 10 or something like that. I will let you figure out what works best for you. Maybe I go 10 on the softness. Okay, and okay, so what I'll do here is, the best I can, I will show you with and without. So that's without the shadow, and that's with the shadow. I think it makes it look a little bit more believable. Okay, so we need to actually marry these two graphics into one layer. And we're going to do a process that I mentioned in Module 4, and that is nesting, N-E-S-T, nesting. Okay, so what nesting does is actually take two or more layers and squish them. Yep, that's a technical term. They squish them down to a single layer. So I'm just going to take in whatever you highlight, and then I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to select a nest. It's going to ask you to name it. And I'm going to name this logo ending logo, and I'm going to name it 2 because I've already done this once for my example, but you can name yours whatever you want. Just make it easy for yourself to find it. Okay, so I'm going to click OK, and then what happens, look there, it squishes it down to whatever you named it. All right, and when I open it back up, there are my layers. Now I have one more issue that I need to deal with. Okay, so this is future Chad talking to past Chad of about 15 minutes ago. One thing that I was unaware of that I just learned is that whenever you nest, what I just did, nesting does not respect blend modes. So whenever you nest, any blend mode that you had enabled within your layers, it basically goes back to normal. So the option of putting a drop shadow in conjunction with the layer using a blend mode are not that doable without a lot of masking involved. So you know what? We're just going to call it good right now and move on. Okay. So we have our mask. We have our logo, and I'm really zoomed in right here. I'm going to go back to fit. Okay, so I have our logo, and now the thing is we need to have the car reveal this logo. And you know what? That is not as hard as you might think, right? So what we need to do is we actually need to make a copy of this car layer. And again, using the Alt or Option technique and then dragging while I hold. And so now we have a car sandwich with the logo in the middle, okay? And really, I'm going to take, and I don't need this layer until about like right here. So I'm just going to take and trim this layer. And then just to make life easy on us, I'm going to that there. And also I really don't need the logo until about right there as well. Okay, so it's going to be hidden. They're both going to pop on right there. And then, as you can probably guess, I'm going to use a mask. I'm going to use a mask and draw it around the shape of the car in order to and then animate that mask to reveal the logo. So I'm going to use my pen tool, and this does not have to be that great. Just and there's motion blur on the car, so you're not going to get it perfect. Even if you wanted to, it's just not going to happen, right? So I'm just going to come up about maybe a little over halfway. And once I close the mask, there we are. Oh, I didn't quite go far enough because you can see my logo sticking out there. So I'm just going to take and drag these handles forward a little bit. Okay, and so now this is moving relatively fast. I'm just going to come over here to my mask and actually come back here to the very beginning, first frame, right? And click on my mask, toggle animation button, and then go forward several frames, and then take and then move my mask along with it. Okay, now again, we are having motion blur, so I just kind of want to get where I think the end of the windshield is. And then I go a little bit further. That may be too much. And then as I start to get closer to the graphic, you can see it starting to be revealed. Hey, that's great. So that was only 2 frames, and that car's moving pretty good there. And then I can probably just go ahead and take it off there. And then why not for good measure? Okay, so let's take a look. Not bad. Now we do need to feather. Feathering is your friend, right? And then I'm not going to animate that in any way, shape, or form. I'm just going to come through and take the feather adjustment and kind of aggressive on this. And the more aggressive you are, the more it looks like that you can see the graphic through the windshield or the back windshield of the car. Maybe I want to take my selection tool, just take and just lower this just a bit. And let's play it, see how it looks. Not bad. There's a bit of a reflection that was distracting me there, but that's okay. Okay, good. All right, so once we have that, what we can do now is think about, do we want to jazz this up a little bit? And it's not that hard to do, and that is we're going to animate this logo just a little bit, right? So right when the car totally reveals it, I would like it to be just about in its place. So I'm going to take, and again with the logo, actually don't, if you double click you will go into the nest. Don't do that. I'm going to come back to my sequence with this logo highlighted, and then I go back to the effect controls. I'm going to animate the parameters of scale and rotation. And so that's where I want it to end. So I put 2 keyframes there. I'm going to come back to the beginning of this clip. I'm going to put 2 more keyframes right here. And let's see here. Why don't I say that I want this to be about 120% to start, and then I want a rotation of like -15. Okay, and there we go. We're starting to get somewhere. So it's not much. It's just a little something. Now I see 2 things that are going on right here, right? The anchor point is not perfectly in the center of this graphic, so it's shifting a little bit. And I mean, you may or may not have noticed that. It bugs me, so I'm going to fix it real quick. And so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to look over here at I'm going to click on the motion properties, and I'm going to look at the anchor point, and I'm going to actually adjust the anchor point the graphic to where it is centered. So you can kind of see the anchor point. It's like right in the middle, that little crosshairs in the middle. I'm going to try to get the graphic just perfectly lined up with that in the center, what I think the center is. And then what I have to do is I have to compensate for that by putting it back into position. So I didn't set keyframes on either one of the anchor point or position parameters, so it should be okay. Should not have to. There we go. Okay, so that's good, right? But you'll notice this too, right? So I want you to watch the animation as it goes. Boom, it just stops. It abruptly it stops. That is the hallmark of a very, I'm not going to say immature, but it is, in my opinion, unprofessional looking work. Right? You can do much better than that. Typically your animations need to ease to a stop. Unless you're doing something very stylized and very, I guess, just kinetic, and it needs to be abrupt and draw attention to itself, it needs to come to a slow stop. It needs to ease to a stop, right? And we can do that in Premiere. And it is a process where you actually take and you highlight your keyframes. So I'm going to highlight both of them at the same time, just to be efficient. and you're going to right click on them. And when you do, you'll notice down here that we have some selections. So by default, everything comes in as a linear keyframe, meaning that it has a definite start and a definite stop. Meaning, so the speed at which it moves goes from 0 to 100%, and then going at 100% all the way back down to 0 when it hits the next keyframe. That's what we don't want. So we're going to come in and we're going to select. Guess what word? You might have just remembered this word from just a second ago. Bezier. B-E-Z-I-E-R. It's not Bezier, it's Bezier. Okay, so I'm going to select Bezier. When I do, these keyframes turn into hourglasses. Okay, and we're going to, no, we're not done yet. We need to modify them a little bit. You'll notice that there's a little twirl down icon next to each of these parameters. And I'm going to twirl this down. And I need to actually make this a bit bigger just so you can see what's going on. This is a graphical representation of the keyframe and how it's being animated. You'll see that it's moving. So this is the velocity, the speed at which it moves. It's moving and then it kind of just cuts off, right? I want to take it and I want to just modify this by taking this. I can go too far, right? I just want to line up that curve where it meets that line. Okay? And then I want to do the same with the rotation. And so what that's going to do, it's going to let that animation slow down gently. And let's take a look at it. So again, we went from it just purely stopping to now it just kind of comes in and just eases to a stop. That is what you want for your animations. It looks a lot more polished. Okay, so now that we have that, I'm pretty happy with that. We have our graphic in place. We have our two effects in place. And if we wanted to, we could technically stop here, right? Now you'll notice that on my version that I did one more little thing, and that is I thought it needed a little bit of branding at the beginning, and it needed a way to kind of introduce this whole thing, right? And maybe it would also help you remember the name Red Door Food Pantry. So what I did was I used the graphic one more time at the beginning, and I used a white mat to put it on, and I'll show you again what I did, right? So
You ever wonder how you can help?
So 4 things are really going on here, right? So you have a white mat, and again, I'm just going to mute these for sanity. Okay, so we have the graphic, and it is it's spinning, and I'm doing the same type of animation that I did before. So a spin and a scale with Bezier curves, right? The white background or the white mat fades out, okay? As it fades out, we see the footage in the background, but the footage has a blur on it, okay, to allow you to still focus on the graphic. And then the graphic starts to fade out and the blur starts to go to 0. And then we get into where our effect was. Okay, so hopefully it's relatively seamless. And I'll show you how I did that in case you want to partake in the fun. All right, so first thing I had to do was I actually needed to, because I needed to blur both of these together, guess what? I needed to nest them, right? So I'm going to highlight them and then nest, and then I'm just going to call this opening shot. I'm going to call it 2 because I already have an opening shot that I use for my example. Okay, cool. So there's this, right? And then I know that I'm going to need my graphic. Okay, great. I know I'm going to need that, right? And then a white mat. Now I want to show you how I made this. These are very easy to make. You come down here to your new item button and you click that, and then from there you're going to click on color mat. And then it defaults with all of the settings from your active sequence, and that all looks correct to me. And then I'm going to click OK. And then from there, we're going to pick a color, right? Now I can tell you that when I picked pure white, it made this look dingy by comparison. I'll just show you what that looks like, and then just name it white matte 2 just so I can tell the difference, right? And then I'm going to put this on here and see, dingy. It looks like that it needs to be washed with bleach or something. So I can modify it, don't worry. So I can double click on this again and it'll bring up my color picker, and I'm just going to take, I'm going to stay over here to the far to the right, right? And I'm just going to back off just a little bit from pure white, and then I'm going to click OK, and then, oh, that's maybe a little too much because it's starting to blend in. I want it to have a little bit of contrast, but not too much, right? So that's not enough contrast, and I'll just bring it up. I'll split the difference. How about that? And sure, we'll go with that. I'm going to do one more thing, and you can probably guess I'm going to go back to my effects, and I'm going to use a drop shadow. And come over here and just double click on that, and wow, man, that makes it pop immediately. Maybe bring up my distance just a little bit, soften it up. You can go way too far with that, just a little bit. Okay, sure, why not? Let's continue on, shall we? So I have this. I like what I'm seeing here. Again, guess what I got to do? I have to manipulate the, I'm thinking of it, and now it's coming to me, the anchor point, right? I want to put the anchor point right in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to put that from what I think looks right in the middle, and that's probably pretty close, but we'll find out, shall we? So, and then I'm going to offset the position to put it back into the center, right? And one way to see if we got it somewhat right is just to take the rotation and to spin it. And does it look like it's spinning a little off kilter? It does still, so I'm not quite there yet. So go back to 0 on my rotation. Okay, and let me spin it again. Oh, that's even worse. It may be a little off kilter. We're just going to have to deal with it. Close enough for government work, as the saying goes. Maybe that's a bit better. It needs to come down just a bit. And that maybe needs to come over to the side just a bit too. Okay, you know what? I am losing patience, so we're just going to say that it's fine. Okay, I'm going to reline it up with my position now. So hopefully you get the idea between anchor point and position. So anchor point is what is the center of the asset. Position is where it lies on the screen. Okay, so we're going to say that's cool. Okay, now from there, what I want to do is I want to animate it, and I want to do a little rotation like we did last time. And then I'm going, after the rotation happens, I'm going to start to fade out the white matte, and then fade out the logo after that, and then we'll continue on with the footage underneath. Okay, so let's turn back on our audio just so we can hear it real quick. So literally like that much right there. So this is something that I haven't covered before, and you'll notice that right here I have time code, and this is called the playhead position, and it will tell me exactly where I'm at to the frame. If you are unaware of this, so these 4 numbers here, they represent time within video, and so it is listed as hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. Okay, so each frame of video, each second of video is divided into a number of frames. We happen to be working in a sequence that is 24 frames per second. A lot of times you'll also be working in sequences that are 30 frames per second. So this is 24, and so I can actually come over here and I can type a number. So I can type 200 for 2 seconds, 0 frames, and it will default right to that. Okay, so I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to look and listen. I think maybe 1 second and 13 frames feels about the perfect length for this animation. Your mileage may vary. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and scale and then rotation. I'm going to click on those toggle animation buttons. I'm going to come back over here and again drop 2 more keyframes. I'm going to say, let's say 120, right? That may be a little much. And then rotation, -15. You know what? I can tell you that that is moving way too slow. And then also I'm going to come back here. I don't remember the exact settings I used last time, so I'm just going to have to still moving kind of slow for my taste. So you see that when you're editing that, okay, that's getting better. There's a lot that goes into it, especially fine-tuning effects. If you're going to do it right and make it look decent, sometimes you're going to spend a long time. Okay, that's getting somewhere. You're going to spend some time getting the look fine-tuned, right? So I'm going to come again. We're going to start at 100%. I'm going to make these final keyframes, these Bezier curves as well, and we know that process. I'm just going to fine-tune these real quickly, and we'll see the difference. And it'll slow to a stop for us. Okay, that's looking pretty sharp. Okay, so we got that. We're going to come in here, and then we need to start to fade out this matte. So the matte will probably be completely gone by this point. That's fine. To fade this out, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to get a little fancy. I'm going to say, I'm going to drop a keyframe on the opacity, and then come over here. And then I'm going to drop another keyframe right here, and I need to make this one go to 100 or 0, right? So from there,
You ever what?
and I might want to start that fade a little sooner.
Yeah.
And I'm also, guess what I'm going to do? You're going to make these Bezier. So anytime you have a keyframe, you can make them Bezier. And overall, it will just take your video to another level, or your editing work to another level.
You ever wonder how you?
Okay, so we're going to come over here,
You ever?
and then we're going to come into our footage, and our footage is initially going to be blurred, and that is fine, right? So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to type in blur. Hey, that's another effect, and we're using it to enhance our video. That's great. Okay, I'm going to use something called a camera blur. Not all blurs are created equal. There's subtle differences between them. That's too much, I can tell you that. So let's come in at 20. What does that look like? What does 15 look like? Okay, so yeah, we'll do 15. All right, so I'm going to say we're there. And then I want my blur to start to, I want to be totally out of the blur by like right here. Okay, and then so this is, you'll see that this parameter, and a parameter is something that you can keyframe basically, is called %blur. It's very creative. All right, I'm going to come back to here and then drop another keyframe, and then so I'm going to go to here, and guess what? I'm going to make that one 0. And then as on every other keyframe that we're working with, or almost every other one, we're going to make that into Bezier as well. Okay, so it's a nice little, so it comes out of white, and then it's almost as soon as it comes out of white, guess what? Then it's focusing up. So it almost looks like we came in from white and the camera's focusing. Not really, but maybe a little bit. Maybe we're suggesting that a little bit. Okay, so then the last thing we're going to do, guess what? We're going to work on the opacity of this. So I want Red Door Food Pantry logo to be completely transparent by this time. So I'm going to get on opacity here, and then I'm going to come back just a little bit. And we'll drop another keyframe there. Okay, and then 0. And from there, Bezier again. This tutorial is becoming a little longer than I would have liked it to be, but guess what? We're almost done. Okay, and
You ever wonder how you can
let's take a look.
You ever wonder how you can help a neighbor?
I would like that to fade a little bit longer. You can adjust the keyframes too, the timing, by you can just pick them up and drag them where they're at. That's just great, man.
You ever wonder how you can help? You ever wonder how you can help a neighbor in need?
Okay, be sure to Command S or Control S constantly to save. One thing I do want to show you, and that is, hey, guess what happened? You notice that a lot of times we have a yellow line up above here in Premiere, but sometimes we get a red line. Whenever you see the red line, that's Premiere telling you that, hey, listen, I really need to render this. I need to go through and mathematically figure out what the frames need to look like and make versions, permanent versions of those. Well, I guess temporary permanent versions of those, in order to be able to play this back for you. It'll still try to play it back, but there's no guarantees, right? So you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to render that. And rendering process is very easy. All you have to do is just press Enter on your keyboard, not your number pad, but your keyboard. And any open files that need to be rendered will render for you. This process will also happen automatically for you when you go to export. But if you really want to see what something looks like, you'll need to, if it turns red, you need to render it.
You ever wonder how you can help a neighbor in need?
And so from there, I think I'm done. So again, the same process holds for exporting, and just in case you didn't see that before, go over to the Export tab up top. You can pick a preset. By default, it's saying high quality 1080p HD. Sorry, not PhD, that's a degree. 1080p space HD. Okay, HD is a quality, right? And we're gonna say, I looked at this, and this is almost exactly the same as the presets that I showed you, so I'm just gonna go with this. I think it's fine, and I'm going to, I like where this is going to land, and let me just look at my file name. That's fine, and I'm going to export. And while that's exporting, I'll just say that this concludes the tutorial, and if you have any questions, please let me know, and I hope you got a lot out of it. Even I learned something that, if you recall what I learned, that whenever you nest two clips, the two clips do not respect the, or does not maintain any type of blend mode that you might have put on to the clip. Okay, so for that, have a good one, and I will see you in class.